yeah, here I am retired now and aimed now mostly at the pro-life cause.
All right, folks, welcome back to Humans of the Pro-Life Movement, a show within the Pro-Life Guys podcast where we explore the lives of the defenders of the defenseless, talking to the incredible women and men across the country and around the world who are sacrificing their time and energy for preborn children to save their lives, to help educate people around the country and share a little bit about what their role in the pro-life movement looks like. So often in our country, in our culture, the only narrative about the pro-life movement is put forth by mainstream media. And I think it's important that we start telling our own story and hearing the stories from people like the guest that I have joining me today. Tim, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Cam. So we're right into a cold spell, so it feels like minus 40 out. So
bingo.
there we
Welcome to
go. It's
Canada.
nice to be inside. Yeah.
True
Thanks.
enough. True enough. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining today. To kick us off, I love starting with the question about who you are kind of outside the pro-life movement. So often pro-lifers are portrayed as these people who live, eat, and breathe only the pro-life movement. We're pro-life machines and whatnot. And I'm sure there's a few of those out there. And yet we're so much more than a pro-life machine. And I'm curious, if someone were to ask you, who is Tim Scatliff, what would you say? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've I've been married to my wife Louise now for 48 years this month, um, and I've been retired for we've both been retired for over a dozen years. So it's been really nice. It's that time of your life. Uh, we have four children. We've got two nurses, and we have two computer engineers. Uh, and last count, 11 grandchildren. We have, I've my background is in software development. I was in software development from about a year before we got married for about 35 years, and mostly in the brokerage industry. And so I've got my hobbies. I just love the outdoors. I love canoeing. I love archery. In fact, it was through archery that I met my wife. I've also loved to travel, love to visit with family and friends around fires and things like that. Especially as we get older, we don't carry the canoe as well. I used to love dune buggies. I used to love getting off-roading in the background and building dune buggies. My dad was an astronomer. He sort of got me into that, so I'm pretty keen about that as well. But mostly growing up and not so much lately. A lot of road trips, a lot of photography, a lot of videography, and trying to put together videos for family and friends. And so and I've traveled quite a bit, with my job through the software development into Western Europe, North America, United States mostly, and also Japan. So it's been sort of an interesting, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, the career. So yeah, here I am retired now and aimed now mostly at the pro-life cause.
Very good. Very good. One of my favorite things to do, I talk to my wife constantly about how one of these days we'll have to take a family trip out to Winnipeg, because the only way that this conversation would be even better is if we were doing it around a campfire. I've enjoyed several campfire discussions with you about all sorts of things in Winnipeg,
Mm-hmm.
and I look forward to more, Lord willing, in the future. To dive into kind of the meat and potatoes, as it were, of the thrust of this kind of series, Humans of the Pro-Life Movement. You mentioned now a lot of your focus, now that you're retired, is working within the pro-life movement, and yet this isn't something that has emerged only in recent years. You've been actively involved in the pro-life movement for many years now in a variety of different ways. And I'm curious, Scott Klusendorf puts it very well that he often says that people aren't invited into the pro-life movement. They're summoned. There's some kind of a summoning of them into the pro-life movement, some moment or some interaction that kind of opened their eyes to how they can be involved, how they can contribute towards the pro-life movement. And I'm curious, I don't know if you have a very specific summoning kind of story, but tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in the pro-life movement and what that looked like.
Well, it's a lot to do with, of course, the age. I'll be 72 this year. At the time that I was, at in high school, abortion really wasn't an issue, and we were also families were very, they would go to church every Sunday. We were really the first of the baby boomers, so we grew up, I would say, quite privileged. Our parents came from the war. My mother was graduated from nursing here in Winnipeg at St. Boniface Hospital, and took a vacation to England in 1939. Uh, her return ticket never really worked for several years. So she, yeah, so she actually obviously lived in England during the Battle of Britain. She actually lived in Brighton for a while after she got married to my dad. My dad was uh, just graduated from medicine at that time, and he met my mother while they were doing, child birthing. My mom was taking, how to deliver babies and be a good midwife, and so that's what she did during the war. Um, and they actually lived in Brighton. They moved from London to Brighton, and they lived right on the seacoast. And they saw the German pilots coming right off the English Channel. And my oldest brother had been born at that time, and so they saw all that horror. So when they came back, yeah, they started raising a family, and they forgot entirely about. They didn't want us to suffer, and we got spoiled. I think our generation was spoiled. So by the time I was in, I would say, grade 12, abortion started coming up as a topic. It was sort of approaching the omnibus bill. And my dad happened to be the medical director of Misericordia Hospital, so it was a very serious thing for Catholic hospitals at the time. Sisters of Misericordia were very much involved in helping young women in crisis. They had, they had a center for helping them, deliver the baby and survive and go on to live a good life in that. And my dad was that was sort of very dear to his heart. So I guess I was pro-life from my parents is very clear. Um, so yeah, so also at that time, because my dad was so involved in the movement, we started getting involved with the League for Life. And we started seeing the horrors of abortion. We started seeing the pamphlets, the images of the victims of abortion. And that was a huge and sort of horrible start to realize really that we're starting to do this in Canada. And that was, so we got involved. We started volunteering fairly, probably after we had our first three children. Um, we would still be, we would be involved with League for Life, which is now Life's Vision. And my wife became president of Life's Vision. One hand with our youngest. He was 4 years old. She'd bring him to the office, and she was president of Winnipeg Life's Vision. My sister also took on that role when my wife's term was up, and then my sister-in-law took that role. So family conversations were pretty much, you know, about pro-life cause, and And our parish priest was an incredibly strong uh, preacher on pro-life. There wasn't a Sunday that would go by without him reminding us we have to protect those preborn, those innocent children, and that. So it, yeah, but really convicted in that. And I also had a friend of mine whose sister had got pregnant, and their parents um, really coerced her into having an abortion. She was underage, and that really killed their relationships. She moved away as soon as she could. She moved away from Winnipeg, and they basically really never saw her again. She just left them, and it was a very heartbreaking thing for my friend and his family. And yeah, they in those days, I don't think they treated women very well at all. Women in crisis, and sometimes they were shamed. Um, so it wasn't long before we got really involved in the crisis pregnancy centers to sort of at least volunteer and help out.
I mean, there's so much there that we could unpack. I think that's so cool how much of a family endeavor it was really with League for Life there in Winnipeg and throughout Manitoba, and how this was something that you was built into the culture of your family, your extended family through your sister-in-law as well, and obviously this being passed down to you from your parents, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there are many in the audience who might be very very wishing that they too had a priest or a pastor who represented the life issue as frequently. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
stories of the homilies and other speeches that you've shared with me about life issues presented by your priest in those kind of formative years as a young family, and that kind of has grown and grown. I know that having served with you on the board of Life Canada, another nonprofit pro-life organization that is kind of an umbrella group. I know that you've been involved with Manitoba Life's Vision and Life's Vision Winnipeg as well. Hopefully, I got those the right way around and not opposite. But maybe share a little bit. So you've been involved in various ways. Knights of Columbus as well, as a director of life and family. Maybe are there any kind of stories or events that stand out in the last kind of several decades that you think of when you think of your role in the movement? What has it been like kind of observing the growth and I'm sure in some ways ebbs and flows of pro-life outreach and pro-life action, how it's manifest in different ways and different times, that kind of thing. What has it been like being somebody who's been involved for as long as you have in the cause of life?
Well, that's a awfully good question, Cam, and I must say that there was a time from the time my wife got involved to maybe the mid 1980s, when computers first came out, that I was involved quite a bit. Um, and then what happened is I got involved with my career. My family was growing up. We only had one person working, so finances were always a struggle. So we really had to focus on. I had to focus on my career and keep growing it. Um, I did get, so the last thing I was doing really before I got back in my career was, computers became very wonderful tools, and we had a old addressograph machine at the League for Life. We also were involved with the Alliance for Life of Canada, and a Desilets of the 1 million signatures and that for the Parliament. But tracking all this was very hard. So I developed a program first in COBOL and then in Pascal to manage the donations that were coming in, the addresses, so we could get rid of all this mechanical stuff. Um, no, that sort of after that, I sort of got into more back into my career and focused on it, and really didn't come back to the pro-life movement other than financially supporting them until I retired in 2007.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And I mean, speaking from as somebody who isn't very tech savvy at all, I know how valuable and how important, like you said, kind of laying those foundations of being able to track
Mm,
even the
mhm.
the
Yeah.
contact lists and mailing lists and whatnot. While I was active in Victoria, where I grew up, um, Choose Life Victoria passed on, they must have passed on a dozen, maybe even 2 dozen binders full of not only newspaper
Wow.
clippings, but also just like loose leaf paper with email addresses as email became a thing, but more even so, mailing addresses and whatnot. And how important technology is in any movement, let alone the pro life movement, where we have people from all over the country involved and contributing, like you said, financially or with an hour or two here or there. So you retired then in 2007,
Right.
and that kind of gave you an opportunity to get more involved in local pro-life work, not even just in Winnipeg, but also provincially and nationally. And for some people, when they look at retirement, they say, "Oh, finally, I can get my golf membership at the local golf course, or I'm going to fly around and see the world." And not to say I don't know if you're a golfer, but I know that you've had some very, very cool family trips and road trips and whatnot, canoeing and all sorts of things. But maybe share a little bit about how seeing this opportunity to get more involved, you didn't necessarily take the easy route of retirement and just put your feet up and pack on the retirement 40 kind of um, dealing with retirement that way, but rather saw this as an opportunity to get more involved in the pro-life movement. What was that like for you?
It really was a wonderful experience. I actually met an older woman at a church event one day in the city here, and she was wearing all these sort of pro life pins and everything like that. And she was helping herself to a cup of coffee, so I went up to her and I started talking with her about, how's it going? What's the movement like again? And on and on. We had a great talk, and she invited me to one of the meetings. And I really liked the people I worked with. I really liked their values, their passion. Um, the charity that they showed. It, it was really good for me to get back involved. I just felt it like returning home, if you wish. I also met a lot of because of that. I met a lot of the other people. In the city and in the province who were involved in pro-life, and we really connected. I like them very much, and I like what they're doing, and I felt better when I go home at night. I would feel better. I felt at least we're doing something, and I really saw a need out there. I believe strongly that there are so many people who are pro-life, but they're so silent on it. They're just not talking about it, and in the meantime, the culture of death starts to progress and progress and progress, and people sort of deny the slippery slope, but it's there. That is so evident. We see that now with Bill C-7 and euthanasia, assisted suicide. Uh, Sort of horrified last week when we saw it in the states with allowing babies to die if they were born with a failed abortion. Um, those that movement. I mean, we've seen it all the way along in that last, since 2007 for me. I've seen that when I got involved, and that just kept inspiring me to keep going. I'm going to say the other thing, I was talked into by one of our fellow parishioners to join the Knights of Columbus. I had never belonged. My dad was a knight, but I never belonged. Neither did my brothers. And so what I did do is join that, and I found a lot of people there that were so passionate as well about the life issues, and I found it very valuable to me to get that connection.
I'm glad that you mentioned the Knights of Columbus. I've been a knight. I must admit an inactive Knight of Columbus for quite a while now. But I think that for a lot of Catholics out there, and I know that not all of our or not many of our audience are Catholic, but for those who are, sometimes the Knights of Columbus are perceived as only being dedicated towards life insurance, and that's so often they do life insurance and they make really good pancakes. And yet, the life issues has been a major cornerstone for the Knights of Columbus ever since their inception, really, and has become a bigger and bigger focus. I know that there's countless councils across the country that have fundraised enormous amounts of money for ultrasound machines or for wheelchairs for people with disabilities towards the end of their life, or all sorts of other programs. And maybe as somebody who is quite familiar with the Knights of Columbus and what they do for the life issues, whether it's abortion or euthanasia, maybe if you could share just a summary, or just a thought on that for somebody who isn't aware of what the Knights of Columbus are about, especially as it pertains to the life issues, I guess.
Well, sure. Thank you. Thank you for asking that, Cam. The Knights of Columbus are incredibly involved in protecting what the widows and the orphans. In the late 1800s, that's really why it was set up, because there were men dying and there were families that were left without money, without a provider. So that is really why the insurance company was set up. And also they wanted insurance that was ethical. They wanted to make sure that they were investing in products and companies that were ethical, that were following what really Christ has taught us. So that was very important. The ultrasound initiative was something that started. I'm not sure how long ago it was started. I know it was in play when I joined the Knights of Columbus. I think I joined in about 2009 or 2010. And now they have over 1,300 ultrasound machines that they donate mostly across across the United States, because they do have 3 provinces in Canada where they've donated. But our healthcare system is so much different, and it's very difficult to bring in an ultrasound machine that except through the healthcare system. But it's saved countless women who have seen their child and seen that this is just not a clump of cells. This is a living child. So that's really good. I wanted to read something to you here. This is the Supreme Knight. So this is the guy, the top knight, if you wish, from Connecticut, who is worldwide the top knight. He's actually retiring at the end of February, I believe it is. But his name is Carl Anderson, Supreme Knight Carl Anderson, and he said this last week. He said, in the late 20th century and into the 21st, no issue has been more important in the United States than abortion. Abortion is the issue of the day in which an entire class of people have been denied their humanity completely. The very personhood of the unborn is denied, and the consequences in the United States alone has been 50 million deaths. This is It is the priority for the Knights of Columbus, uh, is the life issues, the culture of life. And yes, there's about 3 other programs, but the life program is the most important one.
I've been so appreciative of the leadership that the Knights have taken in so many initiatives across Canada, and I read about them in the magazines that come out throughout the States and around the world as well. Um, just one or two more questions for you as we start to move towards the kind of call to action, as it were. One thing that I've always appreciated, I've known you, I would say, for 5 or 6 years now, since I first joined the Life Canada board with you. Um, and one thing that I've always been impressed with is while each pro-life organization has slightly different focuses and whatnot, I've really been encouraged by the work that you've been able to do within the church. Often, there's groups like CCBR and others that are out on doorsteps and street corners and whatnot. And not to say that Life's Vision Winnipeg isn't about that, but I've really respected the amount of investment that you guys have put into developing a stronger foundation among Catholics, among Christians within the pews, because it's going to be difficult to make up ground if our own foundation is sliding away from under our own feet. And so Just a curious thought on how things have gone and why you've kind of chosen to focus in some ways. Not that it's not the only thing that you guys do, but in some ways, I think of it as one of the things that you really excel upon in Winnipeg and throughout Manitoba, of engaging people within the pews so that they have that strong foundation, so that we're not hemorrhaging pro-lifers as we have been for many decades now, I feel like.
Yes, thank you, Cam. Uh, you know, when we first started the League for Life way back when, we did pretty well everything, like the activism. We did we did education. We did debates on the radio. We did a lot of different things. But really, the pro-life cause has grown so much stronger, and we're getting so many other groups like CCBR, like uh, CLC, the Campaign Life, like the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. We need a law. Life Canada. There's just so many other organizations that are doing so well. So what we are trying to do with Life's Vision is we think our niche is to get education into the people, into the Christian communities, because even with like Pew Research in 2016, they indicated that there is so much work left to do in our churches. There's too many people. They're not only silent on the issue of abortion and assisted suicide, for that matter, but they're also, even the statistics, 1 in 4 pregnancies end by abortion. It's not so much different in the Christian community, and that's terrible. We know better than that, or we should be. And of course, we're all the Christian churches are all, as our Pope used to say, a field hospital for the wounded, and we're all like that, right? And you know, we don't go to we aren't following the church necessarily because of the people who are in the church, whether it be the priests, the popes. We're doing it because of Christ's teaching. We're doing it because Christ taught us how to value life, what is meaningful, and that sort of thing. So our focus on Life's Vision is we have basically 4 anchors, 5 anchors really, but 4 important ones. The first one, the first 2 are really to do about Christian unity. This is something that we might, Catholics and non-Catholics, they might disagree a little bit about how to interpret Scripture, or even even some other aspects, whether it be secular aspects. It's like we may differ from that, but we don't differ on the value that thou shalt not kill, and that life begins at conception and should end at natural death. So, and Christian unity is so important in this. So, anchor number 1 is really for us to reach into the pews, reach into the churches of the non-Catholic Christians, and get them involved, and get them, I guess, aware of it's how important it is to have your voice heard. You know, Even in families, like, how do we talk to our families about these difficult questions like abortion? How do we do so in a very respectful, in a very articulate, a very truthful way, so that we can convince, and commit our own family, our children, um, our in-laws, like son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, our grandchildren, who are, in our case, our grandchildren are young adults now and coming up to young adults. How do we talk about that? And so education is very important in anchor number 1, the non-Catholic community, and anchor number 2, which is a Catholic community, which is a different tradition. Right? It has more of a hierarchy. So you approach things differently. Um, and I have found that CCPR is one of our go-to places for quality education that basically follows those things. It's charitable, it's effective, it's really true to our faith, And it's wonderfully and very professionally done. So we've, with Life's Vision, we've actually, as you know, Cam, we've licensed the CCBR study series on how we respond to Christians' response. And we are out as much as we can. If it wasn't for COVID, would be hosting every night, you know, a small group to educate people and that sort of thing. And it's not that they don't, they're brilliant, they're smart people, but everybody is so busy and you really, it's a tough subject. And so therefore, because it's a tough subject, some people just don't get involved. And we want to change that. We want them to be comfortable talking with their family and friends. So those are the two key anchors. We do have a fifth anchor, which is prayer, and there's no order, but we do have a lot of focus on having prayer teams in all denominations praying to an end to abortion and to assisted suicide.
Very good, very good. I think that you hit the nail on the head of the absolute importance to be able and willing to give a defense of the pro-life worldview. I feel like what will bring change in our society. We often talk about transforming society back into one which rejects abortion. That isn't going to be achieved by sweeping political movements that
Mm-hmm.
just come up out of nowhere, sort of thing. That happens family by family, neighborhood by neighborhood, conversations you have with your coworkers, with your friends, with your family members, and then later on, those end up
Right.
influencing politicians and other major decision makers. But it's often that groundwork, often that conversation, which is the most important in getting us to that society in which we reject all forms of abortion. And as you mentioned, we also are pushing back against euthanasia, assisted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
We can't rely on the courts, we can't rely on politicians, not because they're inherently bad people, but because as a country which still proclaims to be a democracy and just a society of human beings, we are relational people and we need to change culture person by person and not try to
Mm-hmm.
find a silver bullet of how a politician can ramrod through even a good pro-life law, but without engaging the people. We cannot get around the fact that sooner or later we're going to have to talk to our friends and family members about this issue. And I'm glad that you
Mm-hmm.
guys have been able to make use of that study series that you mentioned. I'll put a link to that in the show notes to make sure that anyone who's curious about it can find it on our website. The final question that I wanted to throw to you, Tim, that I know that you've been so involved in various different ways and getting more and more people involved in the movement and whatnot. And I wonder if you could offer some kind of, whether it's inspiration or instruction or whatever it may be, for somebody, if there's somebody who watches this video or has been following along the Pro Life Guys podcast and says, I want to get involved, I just don't know if I'm ready. What word of encouragement could you offer for somebody who wants to get involved but is maybe hesitant to do so? Why should they get involved actively in the pro-life movement?
Well, that's an incredibly powerful, goal for us to get people inspired and get people out there to help out. I think there are so many ways you can help out. If your strength is helping people feel value or helping people, like, for example, a crisis pregnancy, uh, being able to raise, have projects to raise funds or maybe get material, whether it be diapers, whether it be formula, whether it be just being there for people that are having crisis pregnancies, or at the end of life, visiting, if that's what you do well, visit the sick. Um, just visit them and make them feel like they really are important. They have meaning in their life, and that's where the book that Blaise Alade and Jonathan Van Maren did on Guide to Discussing Assisted Suicide talks a lot about that. The old idea of being present for someone. Kevin Dunn does some wonderful work with his thing on that, and especially some of his recent videos, are not just fatal flaws and that sort of thing, but the power of presence and that sort of thing. Also, Stephanie Gray Connor's new book, just actually on going into chapter 3 of that book, and it's just absolutely wonderful help. So you can get comfortable in talking about these issues. Again, I will go back to the CCBR study guide. You go through uh, those 5 videos, and you have the discussion with the small group you're in. You feel so much more comfortable talking about this. So you can actually have those conversations, finding common ground, so that and asking questions, so that you do show that you respect people's opinion. And there is a lot of things in common. Even some people, you may find a lot of people that say they're pro-choice, but really they're mostly pro-life. They don't believe in abortion after a certain time, and yet they call themselves pro-choice because they believe in this idea of tolerance, which absolutely tolerance is a wonderful idea to a limit. We don't tolerate killing children. We don't tolerate killing, toddlers. We don't. We really recognize. My wife and I, for example, have had 2 miscarriages for number 5 and number 6. Back in the mid '80s. We You could help people like that who are suffering, people that do need, some sort of healing in their lives, post-abortive healing. There's a lot that you can do there. So you can volunteer at a crisis pregnancy center, even if you aren't doing any sort of visiting. You learn from them, right? You by osmosis, just being there, doing this, and you can participate. Prayer is another way. You may not be able to get out. You may be older. You may be a powerful prayer warrior. Please pray for the cause. There's just so many ways, but the first way, I think, is make sure you're convinced, and there's a lot of ways to get convinced about the plan. Well, the movie Unplanned, there's one way to start. Uh, there's these educational things we talked about. You can be convinced quite easy, and then you can be sort of convicted. You've got to step up to the cause, and you've got to say something. If you're silent, the other side is you're really basically, by your non-speaking, you're really helping the culture of death.
And what a great note to end on. This idea that it's not just one single role that we're looking for. It's not just a cookie cutter. You have to be able to get out this many literature packages per hour,
Mm-hmm.
drop in the mailboxes. It's not just a single role that fits into the pro-life worldview. Like you said, there's so many different things that people can do based on your temperament, based on
Yes.
your experience or your skill set or your charism, whatever it may be. And and yet, like you said, at the end of the day, the first step is preparing yourself, whether that's a
Right.
book, whether that's a video series, whether that's an article that you read online, to really ground ourselves well in what the pro-life worldview truly stands for, that it's not a condemnation of mothers who have chosen abortion, but rather a condemnation of an action and a deep service towards those who um, are encountering these challenging
Yes.
pregnancies, so that mother, father, and child can all be supported through whatever it is that they're going through. I think that's a beautiful way to think of what is necessary for the pro-life movement. A whole bunch of people from a whole bunch of different walks of life and skill sets and abilities, all doing what they can to make the world a little bit more humane, a little bit more supportive, I suppose. Yeah, thank you so much, Tim, for joining. I'm sure that we could go on and on and on about
Mm-hmm.
different ways people can get involved, different stories from the past decade or so since your retirement. I really appreciate you giving the time to share with us a little bit about your journey and your role in the pro-life movement. And for those of you who are tuning in, this is a series. We've got lots of other episodes of Humans of the Pro-Life Movement, but not only that, we also have our 2 other series our kind of flagship series, the Pro-Life Guys podcast, where we cover conversation tools and skills that you can apply on the street with your friends, with your family members, whomever it is you're talking to, as well as our new series called The Pulse, in which we round up all of the important and interesting pro-life news from around the world so that you know what is going on. Thank you again, Tim. Super appreciate it. And I wish you and Louise and the family all the best there in Winnipeg. I know that it's cold. I know that the walls start closing in during COVID, but I wish you guys all the best down there.
Thank you so much, Cam, for what you do. And the last thing I would say is it's really good to be able to support people like yourself, like CCBR, like Life Vision, monthly donations of $10, for example, or more. Wonderful stuff. You get enough people doing it, and you can really help out in this cause. But thanks so much, Cam. God bless.
We'll put both the website for Winnipeg Life Vision and CCBR in the show notes. And if you're in a position and able to do so, we'd love to have your financial partnership as well so that we can engage more people. So have a great rest of your day wherever you're at, and I hope you're able to tune in next time. Thanks so much.